Hey guys. All right, can everyone in the back hear me okay? You guys good? Thumbs up? All right, cool, thanks. All right, so how many of you get the reference to the title? Okay, a few of you. So I grew up pretty much on Disney VHS tapes. I didn't see a lot of cool movies. So when I married my husband, he's like, "You have no culture." So he introduced me to like every 80s movie that he can find. And ever since watching this one, everything, we take everything to 11. So kind of fun. This is my first time in Canada. Getting here was interesting. Air Canada, nope. They rescheduled my flight, I think, 5 times before I actually got here. Yeah. So my last flight was from Montreal to here, and it was on a prop plane. So right there, I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. There was such bad turbulence. Have anyone ever been to Disneyland, Disney World, and did the Tower of Terror? That's pretty much what it was. It dropped so many times, and I think on the last time the pilot pulled up into the side, so I hit my head last night so hard. I was actually bleeding, and I didn't even think I was going to be here. So if I happen to pass out, just kind of roll me over and bring up the next guy. So I think I need a shirt. Like I went to Hackfest, and all I got was a concussion, and WebMD said I was going to die. No big deal. All right, so my name is Stephanie. You can call me Snow, either one. I'm from Salt Lake City. Kind of a fun story how I got there. I'm originally from California, and my husband and I both travel for work. We decided one day to move. We didn't know where we wanted to go. We just wanted to move. We picked 10 cities off the CNN 100 Places to Live in the US, and we kept flipping a quarter, and it landed on Salt Lake. So we're kind of stupid, but it worked out. We actually really love it there. I won the Black Badge at DEF CON 22 for the social engineering capture the flag. Has anyone not heard of that? Not heard of it? No? We're all savvy? Okay, cool. All right, I like theme parks. I mentioned Disneyland a lot. I was actually there 2 weeks ago. Um, and I like tabletop games. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. So who here is red team? Raise your hands. Got a handful? What about blue teamers? Okay, so hopefully from this talk, the red team, if you guys do fishing, you can kind of get some ideas, hopefully, to kind of up your pretext and things. And then for blue team, if you're actually working at a company and you have these assessments performed, you can kind of make sure that companies are upping their game and doing it right. I started my own company a few years ago, Snow Offensive Security. We focus on everything offensive, primarily social engineering. So phishing is one of the big ones, OSINT, vishing, and physicals. So before I get into the agenda, I kind of want to talk about why I chose this talk. So when I first started phishing a handful of years ago, I was talking to one of my friends who's a pen tester, and he always bragged that he got 90% success rate. And that like made me super stressed out because I wasn't even coming close to 90%. And he just kept talking about how he was always 90%. And so finally one day I'm like, how do you get 90%? Like what's magical about you? Like what are you doing? He's like, oh, I send out an email to 100 users and I get 90 clicks. But what happens if you sent to 100 users and 9 people click it 10 times? Now you're at 9%. So I think analytics is huge, and I think a lot of people are doing it wrong. So that's kind of one of my big pet peeves. Another one is phishing templates. I see a lot of companies reuse the same shit over and over. And I've been brought into companies who are like, hey, we've had this client for 5 years in a row. They don't want the same one that they've had the last 4 years. Can you switch it up for us? So those are my pet peeves, and that's kind of why I've developed this talk. So we're going to be going over a handful of things. Just basic phishing, so what it is, a methodology I use. OSINT showcase. OSINT, or Open Source Intelligence, you'll hear it referred to as OSINT, OSI, a handful of different things I call OSINT. That's actually going out and finding publicly available information online. So whether it's social media sites, Google, anything that you can find online publicly. And then I'm going to be talking about phishing resurrection. So sometimes there are reasons phishing campaigns fail. And we'll be talking about what you can do to hopefully kind of fix that a little bit. And then wrap it all up with training. All right, so this first section is phishing 101. So I'm going to be talking about what a phish is, the methodologies that I use, and then kind of what I think a good phish looks like. All right, so what is a phish? A phish is social engineering via email. It's sending out a campaign, an email campaign to users, and it's requesting something, whether it's click a link and go to a portal and enter in your websites, download an attachment, even having a conversation with someone trying to get information. That's phishing. So some reasons why phishing is awesome. It's not expensive. You don't have to spend hours or days trying to find an O-day. You build the campaign, and normally the costs involved are whatever hosting the domain is. It's easily scalable. Once you build it, the email, and let's say you're going to be having users click a link, once you build that in the website, that's it. You can send it to 10 people or 1,000 people. It doesn't matter. They're pretty automated. Once you have everything set up, you just hit a button and it goes. If you need to send out an email again, just another click. It's really easy. And then to be successful, excuse me, you only need to work on one person. I was on a red team engagement a few months ago, and we were trying to get credentials to log into another system. And we had sent out an email campaign to only 25 people, and only one person entered in their credentials. But we were able to use those credentials and further attack even more. So even though one person, it worked, it still worked. All right, this is kind of the methodology I follow. So the first step is campaign creation. This is going out, doing your research, figuring out what the pretext is. So who it's coming from, what the content is, what you want the payload to be, and then who your targets are. So that's actually creating the campaign. And then testing and delivery. I like to explain to my clients that when I do phishing assessments, it's not only testing your users, I'm also testing your technology. I send a handful of different tests to my point of contact just to see which ways get into their inbox. I want to see can I actually spoof your domain? I mean, if so, that's a big red flag. You guys need to change that eventually. Um, so I see how I can get in. I'm testing their filters. And then once I send the campaign, I track interactions. So I'm like, oh, I see which users actually are opening it. So if I see a very low open rate, I know something's up. Maybe for some reason it went to their junk mail. Maybe there's some companies out there, their users don't check their email often. So I'm kind of able to adjust. So I see who sees it, and then exploitation is the last step. So who actually complies to the email. All right, anatomy of a phish. These are 5 things I think every phishing email should have. So the first one is know your target desires. What I mean by this is I like to go on Glassdoor a lot. That's a huge one. And I see what people are complaining about or maybe liking. For an example, Facebook groups. I had a client a few weeks back, and they had a Facebook group, and they left it public, not private, and everything they talked about was work related. And one of the guys was saying that he just moved into his new house and he had set up Office 365, and a lot of people started complaining how they used Gmail and it felt unprofessional, and they didn't like it. So I ended up using that to create an Office 365 email. So I sent it saying, hey, we're migrating to the server or the system, and everyone was pretty excited. Sensible payload. So with that, for example, that one had a link with a portal. So you got to make sure it matches up. It makes sense. I'm not going to say, hey, we're migrating to a new email, to a new email system. I'm not going to have you open an attachment. There was going to be a link. And then also seeing if you can find out through open source, like who they use for their antivirus, things like that. Because I do have some payloads that won't work certain ways. So knowing all this stuff ahead of time really helps. Attention grabbing. This is tricky. You don't want to be super flashy. You don't want to say, click here to win a free iPad. And you don't want to be boring that they ignore it. It's really finding that middle ground. And a lot of times, the intention grabber is in the subject line. So things like your account has been locked, your Office 365 email migration is ready. And then call to action. This is the bread and butter of a good phish. If you do not have a call to action, I guarantee you your success rate is not going to be as high as it could be. whenever you receive an email, if they're requesting something by a certain time, it makes you want to comply more. So things like, please see 7 page of this document, or make sure you have this done by specific day and time. And then lastly is analytics, which I talked about a little bit, but being able to track unique users, um, their actions. So, okay, we sent it to 10 users. Bob Smith, he clicked the link 5 times and he entered creds twice. These are things you can use further along the road too for training. All right, OSINT showcase. So I'm going to be going over some ways that I do my OSINT gathering to create phishing campaigns. Talk about a couple of breaches that have started because of phishing, and then just show 2 examples of phishes that I've made with OSINT findings. So I typically look in 3 categories when I'm creating phishes. So I look for vendors, I look for company sensitive, and when I say company sensitive, this is kind of a term that my company uses to describe things that may seem innocuous, like operating systems, who they use for antivirus, things like that. And then employee specific, this comes more in hand when I'm spear phishing. The things highlighted in red are kind of examples I'm going to be showing you here in a second. Google hacking is my favorite thing ever. It is amazing. So when you put something in quotes, it searches for that exact phrase. So if someone were to go to Katsu or sunglasses, you would get almost 8 million hits. If you put that in quotes, you would get, I think it's like 5 or 6 hits. So these are some of the commands that I use when I'm actually looking for vendors. So I'll put our clients in quotes, the company name in quotes, and then things like pest control. I listed out here a bunch of the vendors I look for. Right now, being November, open enrollment season is huge. I don't know how many of you have been getting spammed by your HR, like, hey, you need to sign up for your medical again, or just all this information. This time of year, I love that. That makes a really successful Phish. So if I'm able to find who does their medical, I can go and find their portal, spoof it, create a thing saying, you know, your application was denied, click here to log in, find out why. Things like that. This time of year is amazing. So here's an example of a site I used finding this command. The company's own website will also list their vendors, whether it's to entice employees, showing them what they use. Sometimes you could find it under job listings, things like that. This is an example from Starbucks under their benefits. But if you click the link here, it actually takes you to a PDF, and I want to say it was hundreds of pages, like it was huge. But they list out everyone they use. So just with this information alone, you can definitely craft a successful Phish. Google hacking again to find company sensitive information. So I'm looking like for things like, can I actually find their, if they have an employee login or like portal, something I could replicate in an email, anything like that. If I can find internal lingo, that's really big to put in a Phish. That way they feel like you know what you're talking about. So a command I like to use a lot is file type. So it's important to do, if you do this command, to do the colon and make sure you don't put a space in between file type and PDF. But this is an example of one that I have found. For this company, it shows who they bank with, and also their gym. So if I want to spoof an email either coming from the company or the gym, I know who they use. Glassdoor is one of my favorites too. A lot of times I'm actually able to find vendors or see what people are complaining about or liking. If you are able to see things like a lot of employees complaining about the same thing, that's definitely something to keep in mind as you're crafting these. So this person and a lot of other people had complained that they hated their medical benefits. Instagram is one of my favorites. I keep saying that, it's like getting better and better. So Instagram is awesome. People post pictures and they use these hashtags all the time. Workflow. No, I swear, company name Workflow, like just look for some. And they will have pictures posted, like selfies with their employee badge. This picture, for example, this guy, and I had to block this out, I really don't want to. He was a government contract employee and he hashtagged his company name workflow, and hashtag healthy breakfast. Those are his credentials. Yeah. So sometimes you don't even need to fish. You can find the information on Instagram. But yeah, tons of stuff on Instagram. So if you guys ever get bored, if you don't have an account, you have to have one created to go and look around. But a lot of juicy stuff on there. LinkedIn is really cool too. So if I do a black box assessment, meaning the client just says, okay, fish 100 users, I'm not going to tell you which users. You need to go out and find them. I use LinkedIn a lot. I find the employee's full name. Um, and also, too, I search through job descriptions to see if I can get more information. So this employee, for example, had talked about updating policies and procedures. That would be a good fish from this specific person saying, hey, here's a new document. We have a new policy. Things like that work really great. But I talked about black box. Um, so when I try to find users' names, I run into this problem a lot. I don't know if you guys do too. I'm too cheap to pay for like the expensive account. But I see this a lot. So there's kind of a fun hack I don't know if you guys know about. So if you take this information and put it in quotes, so the title, where he lives, ta-da! So it's kind of fun. You're able to actually see their full name now and their description without having to buy a full account. Just a fun little hack. So the guy I used before and this girl, I don't know them. They're not my clients. I don't like picking on people. Well, I kind of do a little bit. That was a lie. But I don't want to make fun of everyone. I'm just showing you examples. This is stuff that I do. This is how attackers do it. So reverse image search. So when I'm talking about employee specific, I'm looking more at spear phishing. So what can I find out about you as a person specifically rather than a company to make a successful fish? So a lot of companies, I mean, maybe the ones you guys work at, they'll have an about us page or maybe an executive team page, and they'll include pictures of people and their full names. For this one, I was able to reverse Google search the image. There's also Tinai. They have plugins that are really cool, make it really fast and easy. And I found her Twitter page. So, and on that, I was able to find some of her interests and things like that. So if I was spearfishing her, that's just one other means to find more information on a person. All right, name check. Does anybody here use name check at all? A couple? So this is one of my favorites too. If you are able to find the user's handle, a lot of times they'll have it like on their Facebook or Twitter, you could plug it in here and it actually shows you, okay, this one's taken, this one's taken, this one's taken. Most likely it's by the same person. So I have an example. Well, before my example, I have a confession. I need a hobby, like really bad. When I get bored, I go like on Twitter and I look for people's like IDs and badges. Like that's my hobby, and it's probably sad. Anyways, this dude posted a picture not that long ago at all of his Microsoft badge, which I now have my own Microsoft badge. Thank you. And yeah, so I took his handle and I put into name check. This guy is all over the internet, guys, like everything. So he has a Facebook and Instagram. And of course, I'm saying if you do this, go out and check these because sometimes people do have the same handles. For this guy, I think almost all of them were legit. But you are able to kind of go further down the rabbit hole and find more things on this guy. He had a YouTube account with him all over the world, like everything you could want to get on a person, like this guy has it out there. And I don't have any examples, but people or Pipple, however you want to say it, it's PIPL.com. That one gives away tons of information. I actually suggest looking yourselves up if you have time, just to see if there's anything out there on yourself. But this guy, I plugged him in there, like home address, cell phone number, like everything you could want on a person. And I have a Microsoft badge. All right, so that kind of wraps up some of the things I look for OSINT. So vendors, employees, things like that. So these are kind of some recent breaches that have started from phishing. I know there are probably hundreds more. Sony, I'm assuming everyone's heard of that one. So the attackers, they use LinkedIn to target specific employees. They found out they were using Apple. They created a spoofed Apple login to gain credentials. and they're able to get some of Sony employees that use it and then use those credentials, I believe, because they were password reusing. So that's a big one. Anthem Blue Cross. This has affected tons of people. This one was speculated to start because of a Phish. I don't know if it was ever confirmed, but there was so much information out there on OSINT against this company. It wouldn't have been hard. Employees were putting things in job descriptions on LinkedIn, definitely things that could have helped gain a successful attack. And then 5 employees or credentials were stolen from Anthem. Alpha is an interesting one. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. I don't know if you guys have heard about that one, but it was a CEO fraud. So the attacker pretended to be the CEO, emailed someone, and asked for W-2s for, I think, all of their 2015 customers, and the person gave it to them. That employee was actually terminated. A little slow, I know. All right. So here's just an example of a Phish I would create on the right. Obviously, I wouldn't use my name or logo. That would be weird. On the left are things that I have found. So I was doing some research on LinkedIn, and I found a specific employee. And that employee, just like the example we see before, she was talking about updating benefits providers and updating things like that. That was like her current job, was to update this stuff. And I was also able to find out that a lot of people hated their current medical benefits. So those kind of work together. But I was missing something. So I knew that a specific person was updating them. I knew everyone hated the current ones. I didn't know what her email signature was. I didn't know her grammar style. So what I had done is I sent her an email just to get a reply. I can't remember what it said. But all I was looking for was her grammar. Did she have nice grammar? Is she one of those people that doesn't capitalize first letter of the sentence? That drives me insane. You know, in her signature, is it basic? Does it have a lot of information? So with her reply, I was able to get all that information, craft my Phish, and use her signature to make it a lot more realistic. My second example, I was able to identify a vendor. Their vendor was actually a training company. And I noticed too, when I looked more into this vendor, for each of their clients, they had branded portals. So they would have their logo and then their client's logo and then a login. So I was able to create that and put my target company's logo in there. So it looked very realistic. But on the vendor's page, they actually had a testimony from a specific person at my target company. So I was definitely able to take all that information to make it realistic. And then sometimes for the red teamers, scopes suck so bad. But I wasn't able to Phish IT personnel. So I just had to make sure they weren't on my list. So I used uh, LinkedIn to make sure nobody on my list was IT related. But with all this information, I was able to craft an email from the company, from a portal that looked exactly like one they were using, and I even mentioned the guy's name who had given a testimony. So every little detail you put in and things you're able to find makes it so much more realistic. Phishing resurrection. So we're going to be talking about reasons why phishing campaigns fail and some things you can do to hopefully kind of bring it back from the dead. All right, so why they fail? Lack of OSINT. Sometimes employees just don't put information out there. It's hard to find. I have had a lot of smaller companies or startup companies where the information, it's not out there. Bad pretext. I have had clients who request a specific pretext, which sucks, and you could only warn them against it so many times. I have one that wants to repeat the same one every year, and it drives me insane. Well-trained employees, they're out there. They are. I know it's crazy, but they are. They're on their A game. They know what to look for. They know they know who to report it to. And then technology works. Maybe their filters are catching everything. You know, maybe you actually can't get your stuff delivered. So these are reasons why I have had phishing campaigns fail. But wait, there's phishing. So phishing is voice phishing. It's making calls over the phone, obviously, to try to elicit information. It is a lot harder than fishing. Actually, talking to a person to try to get them to do things. It's not easy. It's tricky. But this is why I use it. It builds credibility. If I send out a phishing campaign to you and you kind of question it, you don't click the link, you're like, yeah, it kind of looks shady, I don't know. But if I'm able to call and ask you, hey, like, we need this done, we need you to log in by a certain day, it really builds that credibility. Plus, the trusting voice kind of, it helps. Questions. So sometimes people have questions about the Phish. I did a payroll one a few months back. I found out who the company was using, found out everyone hated them, and then I created a Phish from another company, even bigger one, saying, hey, we're migrating to this one. Everyone log in by this day. I had a couple, or a few handful of employees not click the link. So I called them up and I said, we need you to log in by this day if you want your direct deposit to roll over. And she's like, I'm so glad you called. I have questions. She asked if she could have her pay split up so some goes into this account, some goes into. I'm like, oh yeah, we can do that. No big deal. She went back and she logged in like I think it was 6 times that day. I kind of felt bad. Like she's like really excited now. But I mean, it gives them the opportunity to actually ask questions, and then we have insight. So I have had IT catch my fish early on and block my domain. It happens. Um, but if I'm able to find that information, especially over the phone through an employee, that gives me time to go spin up a new domain and resend it. And then no training on phishing. There is for security awareness training. Vishing is very low on the list. I see a lot of what my clients have used, and some of it is just bad. Like it's cartoons on a 5-minute clip on YouTube. Like I don't know how you expect your employees to defend your company after watching this, but it's bad. But if they even do cover vishing, all they say is don't give your username or your password over the phone. That's all they say. I'm not asking anyone for their password. I'm asking them to go log in and put their password in so they don't realize. And so some notes that I have for when I do my follow-up phishing. Does anybody know this commercial? Yeah? It's one of my favorites. It's from Discover. Like, he's a horrible social engineer. It's amazing. Anyways, go watch that commercial. It's from Discover. So follow on pretext. So if I send the email from Blue Cross Blue Shield, I'm going to call and make sure it matches up. I'm not going to say I'm someone in HR. It's just I got to make sure it matches. Prepare for questions. I might have a lot of employees ask me the same questions. It kind of gives me time to go back and actually figure out the answers I want to give them. Fallback strategy, just like I had mentioned, sometimes the domain gets blocked. This kind of gives me time to hurry up, go rebuild it on a new domain and send it out. VoIP and caller ID spoofing. I don't know about your guys' companies, but there are a lot of companies out there that have a callback policy. That's all it is a callback policy. They don't understand they're supposed to get the person's name, go verify it, and then call them back. I've literally had people hang up, call me right back. Like literally, they don't understand they need to verify with someone. So having a legit phone number set up so they can actually call you back is something that I have learned to be helpful. And then voicemail. I'd mentioned phishing for the most part, and training sucks. If someone receives a voicemail, they're not expecting it. Bad guys don't leave voicemails. So if I don't get hold of them, I say, hey, this is so-and-so from such and such. Need you to log into this by this date. This is so successful for me. And I have clients that get pissed. They're like, why are you leaving voicemails? I'm like, well, one, they didn't answer. But two, it's working. Like you need to train them to verify. So voicemails have been very, very successful. All right, we are going to get into train now. We're going to kind of talk about the alpha payroll that I mentioned earlier, and then some things I do to help my clients integrate the assessments into their training program. So this is alpha payroll. They had the CEO fraud against them not that long ago. So this top part is actually from a letter they reported to the state of New Hampshire. I'm just going to read part of it. On or about March 1st or 2nd. How do you not know what day? That confuses me. An Alpha payroll employee responded to a phishing scam email in which the sender represented himself or herself to be the CEO of Alpha Payroll and disguised his or her email address as that of the CEO. In the email, the fraudster requested copies of all 2015 W-2 forms produced by Alpha Payroll on behalf of its customers. So you're telling me that technology failed. They were able to spoof their sending information to look exactly like the CEO. Then training failed. They weren't able to spot it. They didn't know who to verify it. And then policy also failed. So it was reported on CSO Online Magazine, or online, sorry, that there was a policy in place that employees were not allowed to share this information. They actually fired the employee who complied. So they said they were going to do a couple things. So they, one, said they were going to fire the employee, and two, they said they were going to increase training. Their training, as it is, probably didn't cover that policy. So how are future employees supposed to know? And the two, they mentioned nothing about fixing their technology in place. So you could probably still go back and spoof and send from the CEO. So I think you should do a few things. I think that all training, it should be done company-wide, especially your first one. I think it should be white box, everyone in the company. That way you get a good baseline. I think everyone should do it. Even if you divide up pretext by department, it doesn't matter. I think everyone needs to be tested. Analyze, which is amazingly simple, but people don't do, I don't understand. You need to see which users comply, which users don't comply, and then keep going back and tracking those users. You might have users that fail every time. Those users just need more training. They're not stupid, they just need more training. And then educate. So one of the big things my company does, and hold on to your butts, you guys are probably going to get butt hurt because a lot of people don't like this. Well, it's 50-50, either love it or hate it. We do security awareness training in person. I am completely against computer-based training. They are boring. They are a waste of time. Nobody gets it. You keep clicking next, answer questions 100 times. Doesn't matter. You have multiple choice. You can't sell it. Nobody learns anything from it. And we keep saying, train your users, train your users. You keep throwing like 10-minute trainings at them. It sucks. It's not working. We do our trainings in person, and we show realistic results from phishing campaigns. So HR hates me, like a lot. But it works. If I see, hey, my CFO, he fell for this, like, this shit's real. Like, it's happening at my company and people are failing, compared to a 5-minute YouTube cartoon. You tell me which one's more realistic. So that's something we do that's kind of unique. So we make sure all of our trainings are done in person, and we show realistic results. And then we retest. You keep doing it to make sure people are learning. And if you do have those, users who keep failing, give them more training, give them dedicated training, work with them more. And then empowered, employees should know who to report phishing campaigns to. You would be surprised. Like, I'll talk to my point of contacts, and after a wrap up, and I ask them questions like, okay, did anybody report it? A lot of times nobody reported it. Like, how are you telling me I sent out an email to 200 people and not one person reported it? So there's problems there too. They need to make sure they know who to report it to. All right, that is wrapping things up. So we talked about some basic phishing stuff, how I use OSINT to build better campaigns, some things to do by adding phishing to phishing campaigns, and then training, how I think it should be done. Again, totally against computer-based trainings. I think they are a waste of time and they haven't been working for years. All right, guys, that is it. Does anybody have any questions for me? You guys are quiet. Yes. Yes, smishing is big. A lot of clients don't want it for whatever reason because it involves their employees' cell phones. So it's kind of a gray line for some people. I love it. I think it's fun. The question was smishing, SMS phishing, so texting. But it is that would be a great add-on. Unfortunately, a lot of clients don't use it, but I would love to add that to like every campaign I do. Great point. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Yes. How do you address when you work with the company contact and you submit campaign ideas? How do you address instances where the contact maybe gives suggestions, detailing internal processes that maybe they aren't available to hackers online? Oh, that's a good question. So the question was, and correct me if I mess this up, how do I address when I'm working with my point of contact at my client company and they want to use maybe internal things that I can't find online. How do I address that? So I actually haven't ran into it too much. I have ran into it once. The only time, and we talked about this with the client, I think it would be okay is if it was white box. So you give me all the usernames, right, and password, or sorry, not emails to do the test, and this will be more of an insider threat. So it's not more of an attacker. This is okay. I'm in the company. This is things they have information to. I wouldn't suggest doing it all the time, but I think every so often it's a great idea. Another question? I saw a hand. No. All right, guys. I will be around tonight, hopefully recovering from my bump. But thank you guys so much for coming. I appreciate it.